So we're continuing to follow the direct examination of Sean Diddy Combs' ex-girlfriend as she testifies against him at his criminal sex trafficking trial.
For hours now, Cassie Ventura has been describing an explicit and disturbing detail about these freak-offs that she claims that Sean Combs orchestrated. Just moments ago, while testifying about one of those sexual encounters, Ventura said, quote, "It was disgusting, it was too much, it was overwhelming." Back with us now is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Bob, thanks for sticking around with us. There is an interesting bit of testimony that our reporters just pushed out, and Ventura is testifying that she would vet new escorts that Combs would allegedly hire for them if they hadn't been used before, and Combs eagerly wanted to know whether the person that they were hiring was a cop. Obviously, she says that she learned that this whole situation wasn't legal. I wonder what that says to you about proving Combs' intent through his alleged actions here.
Okay, that's a great question. I mean, as a former prosecutor, I love this piece of information because it goes to what we call consciousness of guilt. In other words, you knew you were doing something that was wrong, and that is why you're asking if it's a police officer that's being involved in it. Now, whether or not that's going to win the day for them, as I indicated to you earlier, with regard to these very high-level federal charges of sex trafficking, we don't know. But certainly that's how the prosecutor wants to use this information, whereas the defense wants to say, listen, this was a willing participant who's actually admitting to you on the stand in the government's case that she was a willing participant in assisting him in these quote-unquote freak-offs, and not that she was being forced, threatened, or coerced, which is essential for them on the sex crimes part of this case, but rather as a willing participant. So this kind of evidence cuts both ways, but that's why the prosecution's admitting it. Consciousness of guilt.
These details are just they're kind of horrific as we're hearing about them, Bob. But we should note, and we haven't heard the defense questioning here. They need one juror. They need to convince one juror. How will they try to do that, even if they think they may have lost some jurors in this case? How do they get that one they need?
Yeah, that's great. And you're right. They're going to play to one juror and only one juror. They like to get 12 to get an outright acquittal. But the bottom line is they're going to be able, they're going to say, there's no question about it, the deep state, big government coming after this guy. They couldn't get him any other way. What he did with respect to the victim is horrific. It's a state crime, but they blew this completely out of proportion, trying to make it a federal crime. And therefore, you should find him not guilty. That may resonate with an individual, especially if I were the defense attorney saying, by the way, we have a conspiracy statute here. We have a racketeering. We have something here that talks about all these other people that were involved in this organization. Well, where are they sitting at this counsel table? I don't see them. And I think that's going to be a problem for the government in terms of what you're saying, jury nullification. All that has to happen is one juror sits there and says, you know what, it was over-prosecuted, and I'm not going to say guilty.
I do want to point out that Ventura just now on the stand said that some of the escorts that participated in these acts did so in multiple states. So to your analysis, openly wondering whether there may have been overreach in this sort of racketeering kind of conspiracy, these orchestrated acts on a level that went over states' borders. I wonder if that piece of evidence there is helpful for the prosecution, pointing out that this wasn't something that just happened in one isolated location.
Yeah, absolutely. In order for the federal court to have jurisdiction over this, or prosecutors, U.S. attorneys, they have to be able to show that this was occurring, that there was either enticing, harboring, transporting, or advertising, and it traveled in interstate commerce. Either the people traveled in interstate commerce, that's what enticement would be, or you're using interstate facilities. That's how the federal government has jurisdiction. But that's why a lot of defense lawyers are saying, well, wait a minute, you could say that, you could take basically any average, in my opinion, state rape case where there's ongoing physical abuse with one or more individuals, and you could literally make it a federal court case if you wanted to. The question is whether you should, and I think that's where the defense is going to go. The only reason this is being done is because of who he is and not because of what he did. And that's why the feds, the only way they could get that jurisdiction is with this interstate facility. But again, I think that one juror could sit there and say, you know what, this is just a way of trying to snag the guy in something that should be in a different place, not in federal court.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're saying that, she's testifying that travel for one of those escorts was sometimes coordinated by her or a travel agent for Combs' company or by the escort himself. One of many threads that is taking shape literally live in the courtroom right now. Bob Bianchi, thank you so much for the analysis. And we just learned seconds ago that she is now back on the stand, so we presume that the questioning will continue. Bob, I wonder how ultimately the prosecution is going to use her testimony to connect this to the racketeering charge, because she was asked specifically about how aides were helping to orchestrate these scenes, these freak-offs, but there is a legal definition that needs to be met, and that could be complex, even given the awful nature of the testimony that she's giving.
Yeah, and that's the hard part for the prosecutors here. I mean, the idea that she can't consent. Let's keep in mind, she may not have been able to. She may have been coerced, but the law requires that he's acting knowingly, not how she felt, but what he knew at the time. That's the mental state that's required. And on the racketeering charge, you have to show that he's working in coordination with other people in order to commit these crimes. So this is not your typical, racketeering or criminal enterprise case. To be honest with you, I was surprised that this was brought in federal court in the first place. It's a great state court prosecution, but is the prosecution overreaching when they bring in these racketeering and enterprises? And they're basically saying in the indictment itself, it was to protect his reputation. And I don't think that that's a crime. Many people that are high-level people try to protect their reputation, and people may feel coerced to be with them sexually, whatever, but doesn't mean that they knowingly are committing these kind of racketeering offenses. That's where the prosecution is going to have its difficulty.